Shalom. First and foremost, before I get started on my lesson, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to my elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Salutations and blessings to the hopeful elect. Lord willing, this video will be edifying and to the point. All right. And as of right now, I'm going to entitle this lesson, all right, the cold heart epidemic. All right, the cold heart epidemic. All right, and basically this title stems from, all right, Matthew 24:12, where it speaks about, all right, the love of many shall wax cold. All right, and I believe it was about a day or two ago, all right, where this guy, all right, he basically deleted, all right, his 6 children, his wife, the dog, all right. Then he set basically his house ablaze, all right, and then basically deleted himself as well, all right. And according to, all right, different sources, all right, his wife, all right, basically called him cheating or whatever, all right, and she decided to stay with him, all right, for the sake of the children, all right. And I believe early this month or something like that, he had ended up losing his job, all right. And I guess she planned on just, pretty much giving up and just leaving him, taking the kids, and he lost it, all right. He lost it. And as they say, all right, the elder always says, he always quote this guy, I think it's Salente, where he says, when people have nothing left to lose, all right, they lose it, all right. And that's basically, all right, the story, all right, or the tale of a lot of Americans, all right. They're losing their mind, all right, and they're willing to basically risk it all, all right. They're just, all right, one straw from breaking the camel's back, from just exploding, all right, into a rage, all right. Everybody's on edge, all right. People are losing their jobs, all right. Food prices are escalating, all right, and the list goes on, all right. And this is creating people to be unsympathetic, all right, towards one another, all right, even their own loved ones, all right, or the ones that they so-called say that they love, all right. So I'm gonna get this real quick, all right, which is Matthew 24:12. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold, all right. And that's pretty much, all right, the vibration that's in the world right now, all right. People are not sympathetic or empathetic, all right, to other people's situations, all right. They're only looking out for themselves, all right, because they really don't even have nothing themselves, all right. And really, to be honest, all right, the Lord is really flipping the script, all right, on these Edomites, all right, and these other nations, all right. We're having a transitioning period to where this man's kingdom is being brought down, all right, and spiritually and physically ours is being raised up, all right. And that also comes with, all right, the curses being lifted off of our people waking up to who they are, all right, and amongst other things, all right. And basically these heathens are starting to feel, all right, pretty much the pressure, all right, the Lord is putting on them. Broken homes, all right, them being able to have, or them having financial struggles, all right, them having, dysfunctional families, all right, their families being broken apart, and amongst other things, all right. But this is all prophecy, all right, that these things are going to happen, all right, in these last days, all right, leading up to Yahweh Shai's return, all right. So every time that you see, all right, you're seeing, again, back to the, the title of the lesson, you're seeing a whole bunch of people, all right, having, All right, what a cold heart, a cold mind. All right, willing to do any and everything. All right, either to get their own way, all right, to get over somebody, or whatever the case may be. All right, and there was this other incident. All right, where I'm gonna grab it real quick. Just something brief. Two little articles. All right, two little articles to drive the point. All right, before I land this plane, as the brothers would say. All right, this happened in Indiana. Okay, and it says Indiana woman accused of cutting out father's heart after stabbing him. All right. So it says a 32-year-old Indiana woman accused of stabbing her father, all right, to unalive him and then cutting his heart out is facing murder charges, man. All right. This is part of the things that's going on in the earth. All right. Spirits that are basically created for vengeance, which we're going to get that as well, man. All right. The Lord is putting the spirit on these people, all right, to do these things. All right. Death angels are being, all right, put on different individuals, all right, to enact on their emotions, the things that they're feeling, all right, to go against each other, all right, necks against necks. All right. The scriptures even say that a man's foe shall be of his own household. All right. The Lord said he came to send variance, all right, against, all right, different people. All right. Mother against daughter, son against father, all right, etc., etc. All right. So before the Lord comes back, all right, you're going to have race wars, clash wars. All right. The world is pretty much going to be on fire. All right. As the scriptures say, all right, I come to send fire upon the earth, and what be it if it already be kindled? All right. And that's going to be a result of people hashing out, all right, going head-to-head combat. All right. Which is another reason why I believe that the Lord is putting the spirit, all right, on these people, all right, basically to get fit, to get in shape, all right, to work out. All right, you see the younger people working out. All right, you see people of all ages working out because in a sense they feel like something is in the air, something is happening, something is getting ready to happen. All right, and they feel like they have to be in some type of shape, all right, to be able to survive, all right, whatever it is about to happen that they feel that's happening in the spirit, all right, of things. All right, so it's going to be mass bloodshed. All right, many people are going to be, again, going at it head to head. All right, and it's going to be just a major, again, bloodshed. All right, blood to the harshest bridle. That's how much blood is going to be shed out here. All right, but let's go back to the scriptures. All right, this is all right. This is Zechariah chapter 3, verse 5, and it says, "The just Lord is in the midst thereof. He will not do iniquity. Every morning does he bring his judgment to light. He findeth not, he felleth not. All right, but the unjust knoweth no shame." All right, so every morning does the Lord bring, all right, his judgment to light. Every time, it looks like every time that you see, all right, or every time that you open up Newsbreak or some type of news or whatever the case may be, it just seems like judgment is being poured out each and every day, and it is. All right, it is being poured out each and every day. All right, these judgments are being poured out throughout the earth. All right, because we're in the time of judgment. All right, and the judgment is going to increase, all right, as we get closer. All right, and this is the Lord basically sending those death angels out, man. All right, these death angels are being put on these people. All right, being put on some of these beasts. All right, because even the beasts in the field, all right, these different, because you know you have these zoos, all right, where some of these animals are in prisons, all right, captive. Esau's having them captive for his amusement, all right, for you to go see him, All right, many of those creatures are going to be out. All right, they're going to escape. All right, and many people are going to be judged by them as well. All right, many of the people that are in these different institutions, all right, in these prisons, in these jails, all right, they're going to escape when all hell breaks loose. All right, and guess what they're going to do? They're going to go out into the general public. All right, many of these people are not sane in the mind. All right, many of these men been trapped up for years, 20 years, 30 years. All right, in these jail cells. All right, many of these women, that's why we always say women, not to make this video about women, but many of these women that be flaunting themselves on social media and all of this, all right, you ain't doing nothing but making yourself a target, man. All right, that's the reason why the scriptures say, rise up, you women that are at ease. For many days you shall be troubled, man, because, all right, these men, when they get out, guess who they're going to go to? All right, they're going to go to a lot of you women, man. A lot of you women that threw them into jails. All right, a lot of predators. All right, they're going to be preying on a lot of you women. Even if they're not predators, they're going to be preying on women because they ain't had none in a while. All right, so these are the things that are going to be coming upon the earth, man. All right, right. This is Ecclesiastes chapter Sirach chapter 39 and 28. It says, there be spirits that are created for vengeance, which in their fury lay on sore strokes. In the time of the destruction they pour out the face and appease the wrath of him that made them. All right, Yahweh. All right, the fire, it says fire and hell and famine and death, all these were created for vengeance. All these things are going to be taking place in the earth. Shit, half of these things are happening in the earth right now. A lot of these things are happening in the earth right now. All right, but they're going to intensify. All right, the Lord has not let go of those the four winds, the four angels. All right, the Lord hasn't fully released the angels yet, man. All right, to let them do their full potential, but it's gonna you're soon gonna see it. All right, it says they shall rejoice in his commandments, and they shall be ready upon the earth when need is, and when their time is come, they shall not transgress his word, man. All right, so these angels, all right, they're gonna fulfill the will of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. All right, and they're not gonna miss. All right, it's not gonna be a situation where, all right, the angels go to fulfill the commandment of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, all right, and they be like, damn, I missed my opportunity. No, judgment is going to be happening left and right, all right. Let me get this real quick, all right. One other article that I seen, all right. This is, all right, this is from, it says local too, all right, but this is, this happened in Glendale, Arizona. All right, it says woman's remains found buried, all right, after first date with man she met online. All right, another incident. All right, it says a woman's remains were reportedly found buried after she went on a first date with a man she met online. All right, there you have it. All right, it says a 24-year-old, all right, what it says, Scott Den was taken into custody after authorities say, all right, he deleted a missing 21-year-old woman from Glendale, Arizona. All right. So yeah, man. All right. It says the Glendale Police Department issued a statement on July 9th after Ariana Jones, all right, was reported missing when her family lost connection with her on July 5th. In an update to the missing persons post, all right, law enforcement confirmed, all right, that Ricardo, if I'm pronouncing that name right, had been arrested in connection with her disappearance and murder. All right. It goes on to say, reports state that the officer entered into the victim's apartment to discover that the dog in the kennel without access to food or water. All right. Noticing that the dog seemed to have been alone for days. You see? All right. And it says, speaking with the investigators, the friends of the victim reported, stated that Jones had planned to meet an accomplice for a movie on July 5th, the outlet reported. All right. And it says the surveillance revealed that the data determined that he was the last person that she was with on the day of a disappearance. You see, there you go. There you have it. All right. So you're going to have a lot of incidents, all right, where, all right, things like this is going to happen. People are going to be just dumped off anywhere. All right. The scriptures speak about how, all right, their dead bodies shall lay in the streets as dung. All right. But in that day in society where society is collapsed, all right, you're not going to have it that way, man. All right. People are just going to be laid out. All right. People are just going to be laid out any and everywhere. All right. So let me get this last scripture and I'm going to end it on out. All right. Because knowledge and wisdom shall be the stability of thy times, man. All right, this is 2 Ezra chapter 14 and 14, and it says, let go thee from the mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man, put off not the weak nature. Now, although these things are sad, all right, ultimately, but we really don't even know who these people are. All right, we don't even know what these people or this girl or any of these individuals that may have done, all right, either in this life or their past lives, all right, to receive the type of judgment that they received, all right, here in these times. All right. So that's why it says put off the weak nature, because when you come into the knowledge of this truth, you understand that there is nobody that dies innocent. All right. It says, verse 15, set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee, and haste thee in the times to haste thee to flee from these times, for yet greater evils than those which thou hast seen happen shall be done there here. Shalakia, done hereafter. For look how many, so Shalakia, for look how much the world shall be weakened through age, so much more shall evils increase upon them that dwell therein. All right, so, you know, as we continue to go on and on, all right, getting closer and closer to the day of the Lord, all right, these evils are going to continue, man. All right, so be prepared to see even more and more and hear about more and more tragic things, all right, to happen in the earth. All right, because what? The earth is waxing cold. So Lord willing, this video was edifying. Again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahushai Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to my elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Salutations and blessings to the Akim that do this work in truth and sincerity. Until the next time, Lord willing, I say shalom.